A cat sought help from the police, and what they uncovered after following him left them utterly horrified. It was a chilly autumn morning, and the streets lay mostly empty, shrouded in a delicate mist that hovered above the damp sidewalks, remnants of the night's quietude. The city seemed to carry on as usual, with its uneventful rhythm barely disrupted by anything noteworthy. Ethan and Megan, seasoned officers at the local police department, began their routine day at work. The station, located near the heart of the city by the main square, rarely saw any major action. Their duties typically involved mediating minor disputes between neighbors, handling occasional arguments, or responding to the rare traffic accident. The slow, predictable pace of their work had become second nature to them, blending seamlessly with the serene monotony of the town. While Ethan sipped his morning coffee outside the station, his gaze wandered absent-mindedly across the street until something unusual caught his eye. It was the cat, no ordinary feline, but a familiar presence often seen near the station. With his sleek grey fur and penetrating eyes, the cat was impossible to mistake. Though he didn't seem to have an owner, his frequent appearances had made him a quasi-member of the neighborhood. He moved with an almost spectral grace, silent and elusive, always observing from the sidelines, as if privy to secrets beyond human comprehension. That morning, something was noticeably different. Ethan observed the cat closely and realized it wasn't merely wandering aimlessly like it usually did. Its movements were deliberate, filled with purpose, sparking an immediate sense of intrigue. "Megan, take a look at that cat again," Ethan said, his brows furrowing as he pointed toward the animal slowly making its way toward them. Megan, preoccupied with sorting through papers inside the patrol car, was slow to react. Barely glancing up, she replied dismissively, "Probably just looking for food, like always." To her, the cat's behavior seemed routine, nothing out of the ordinary. But Ethan wasn't convinced. This wasn't the usual casual stroll. The feline had stopped mid-stride, locked eyes with the officers, and let out a piercing, urgent meow. It wasn't the typical sound one would expect from a cat. It was sharp, insistent, almost a plea echoing through the quiet alley beside the station. Curiosity piqued, Ethan crouched down and extended a hand toward the cat, attempting to decipher its intentions. Instead of approaching, the animal recoiled slightly, keeping its intense gaze fixed on him and Megan. Then came another meow, even louder and more desperate, as though the cat was trying to communicate something vital. Ethan straightened and turned to Megan with a serious expression. "This isn't normal. That cat's trying to tell us something. Look at him." The shift in Ethan's tone caught Megan's attention. Reluctantly, she set aside her papers and focused on the cat. As her eyes met its piercing gaze, an unexplainable sense of urgency washed over her. The feline wasn't just staring, it was as if its eyes carried a message, demanding their attention. She hesitated momentarily, but there was no denying the oddness of its behavior. Suddenly, the cat stepped back, still facing them, and moved into the middle of the street. It paused, turned to look at them once more, and appeared to beckon them as though urging them to follow. "Maybe it's just a coincidence," Megan muttered, trying to dismiss the oddity of the moment. Yet, a creeping unease began to stir within her, as though something significant was about to unfold. Just then, the cat turned abruptly and started moving briskly down the street, pausing every so often to glance back at the two officers as if ensuring they were keeping up. Ethan didn't hesitate for a second. He rose swiftly to his feet and, without waiting for Megan's input, declared, "We're following him." Megan glanced at the stack of papers she had been organizing on the car seat, momentarily torn. Was it worth abandoning her work for what might just be a wild goose chase? But Ethan's determined expression left no room for debate. Something deeper, perhaps instinct or an intangible pull, urged her to go along. "All right," she said, exhaling in mild resignation. "But if this turns out to be nothing, you're buying me a coffee." Her attempt to inject some levity into the growing tension did little to lighten the mood. The two officers fell into step behind the cat, who moved with an eerie sense of purpose through the quiet, empty streets. The city, already subdued, felt unusually still that morning, the silence broken only by the sound of their steady footsteps and the cat's occasional purposeful meows. As they walked, the atmosphere began to shift subtly but unmistakably. The sky, once scattered with distant clouds, now seemed to close in, the once remote dark masses gathering ominously overhead. The air grew thick with an almost tangible weight, pressing down on them with an inexplicable unease. The cat, undeterred, led them confidently through deserted alleys and narrow hidden pathways that seemed to materialize out of nowhere. These places, unremarkable and easy to overlook, appeared almost intentionally chosen, adding to the growing mystery. The further they went, the more the sense of foreboding deepened, as if they were being drawn into a secret the city had been trying to keep hidden. The streetlights above flickered intermittently, casting unsettling shadows that danced on the pavement and amplifying the sense of unease settling over the pair. Each flash of light seemed to emphasize the strangeness of their surroundings. "This doesn't feel right," Megan muttered, her voice low and edged with suspicion as she surveyed the area. Her nerves tingled with apprehension, her gaze darting around in search of anything out of place. Ethan, however, was single-minded in his focus. His eyes never left the cat, as if he were convinced it held the key to uncovering something significant. They pressed on, leaving behind the familiar bustle of the city for quieter, more desolate streets. The transformation of their surroundings was stark. What had once been lively urban spaces was now a grim tableau of forgotten, decaying structures. The streets were lined with abandoned warehouses, their facades worn and crumbling, each exuding an air of neglect. The cat finally halted in front of one of the oldest, most decrepit buildings in the area. The warehouse loomed ahead, its exterior a testament to years of disuse. Rusted chains secured its heavy doors, while an ancient padlock hung stubbornly in place, untouched by human hands for what seemed like decades. Wild grass sprouted in tufts around the entrance, and shattered windows lined the upper walls, dark and empty like watchful eyes. Despite the foreboding appearance, the cat didn't waver. Instead, it positioned itself directly before the door and let out a piercing, anguished meow, louder and more urgent than before, demanding attention. "Why did he bring us here?" Megan whispered, her heart pounding against her ribcage. The eerie silence surrounding them felt suffocating, as if the entire world had gone still. Even the wind, which had earlier been a constant presence, seemed to have vanished entirely, leaving the air heavy and stagnant. Ethan, his expression grim and resolute, stepped closer to the warehouse door. The tension was palpable. Every instinct told them something was wrong. The cat, now motionless, stared unblinkingly at the door, an unspoken insistence in its stance. It was clear. The feline wasn't going to move until they acted. "I think we need to go in," Ethan said, his voice firm but betraying the faint tremor of unease beneath his calm exterior. Megan hesitated, her eyes darting around their surroundings. The oppressive atmosphere seemed to weigh heavier with each passing second, as though unseen eyes were observing their every move. The air was thick, charged with an unexplainable tension that made her skin prickle. As Ethan stepped closer to the warehouse door, something caught his attention that sent a shiver down his spine. The rusty padlock was still in place, but the chain securing the door was oddly slack, as though it had been tampered with recently. "This wasn't like this before," Megan said, her voice low as she gestured toward the loose chain. Her tone carried a note of apprehension as she exchanged a glance with Ethan. He nodded silently and moved forward with caution. Megan carefully lifted the chain and with deliberate slowness began pulling the heavy door open. The hinges groaned in protest, the sound slicing through the eerie stillness like a cry from another time. It felt as though the door hadn't been opened in years, and yet here they were. As soon as the gap widened, a foul stench spilled out, thick and nauseating. Both officers instinctively paused, momentarily overwhelmed by the odor. Megan raised her hand to cover her nose, fighting the sickening wave of dread that churned in her stomach. Before either could react further, the cat darted inside without hesitation. Its confident stride suggested it knew exactly where it was headed. Ethan and Megan exchanged a tense glance. Words were unnecessary. Whatever was happening, they had no choice now but to follow. The darkness inside swallowed them as they stepped through the threshold, their flashlights cutting narrow beams through the gloom. The air was stifling, carrying the weight of age and neglect. The interior of the warehouse was a haunting sight, dusty, decrepit, and riddled with decay. Old boxes and broken furniture lay scattered across the floor, shrouded in cobwebs, their purpose long forgotten. Each step they took stirred the silence into an almost palpable discomfort, the sense of something terribly wrong intensifying with every moment. Then the silence shattered. A strange noise rippled through the oppressive stillness, emanating from deep within the warehouse. It was faint at first, a soft rustle, followed by the distinct sound of movement. Something was there. Ethan's pulse quickened as he turned to Megan, who met his gaze with wide, cautious eyes. "Whatever it is," he murmured, his voice low and steady, "we're about to find out." The tension around them felt almost suffocating now, wrapping the two in a grip of silent anticipation as they braced for what lay ahead. If you enjoy thrilling tales like this one, don't forget to hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement helps us keep bringing you more fascinating stories. And if you have your own experience to share, feel free to tell us. It might inspire others who, like you, are passionate about animals. A persistent noise echoed from the back of the warehouse, bouncing off the corroded, time-worn walls. Megan instinctively turned to Ethan. Both could feel the gravity of the moment, as if something significant was about to unfold. Their flashlights wavered slightly in their grip, mirroring the tension and anticipation coursing through them. Ahead of them, the cat pressed forward, moving with the same unyielding purpose that had led him there in the first place. "What do you think it could be?" Megan murmured, her voice low but tinged with a nervous edge. She struggled to regulate her breathing, which was quickening as every sense sharpened, ready to respond to any threat or revelation. "I'm not sure, but we need to stay sharp," Ethan responded, his gaze locked on the shadowy depths from which the unsettling noise had emerged. The cat came to an abrupt halt, pivoting to face the officers, as if urging them to follow through with their mission. The intensity in its eyes seemed to warn them that what lay ahead was far from ordinary. With a drawn-out, tension-filled meow, the cat turned again, heading toward a dimly lit corner of the warehouse. Silence reclaimed the space, broken only by the resonant sound of Megan and Ethan's footsteps as they cautiously advanced. The further they went, the stranger the warehouse appeared. Evidence of recent activity was everywhere: shattered crates, scuff marks on the dusty floor, and a foul stench in the air. Something decayed and putrid that made them instinctively hold their breath. Megan directed her flashlight toward a box in the corner, its lid broken and askew, as though it had been hastily overturned. She hesitated, a cold shiver traveling up her spine, but curiosity urged her forward. With trembling fingers, she lifted the lid entirely, revealing its contents, and what she saw made her gasp. The box contained children's clothing, neatly folded yet carelessly thrown in. These weren't old or tattered garments. They were small coats, shoes, and other belongings, hastily abandoned. "What is this?" Megan whispered, holding up a tiny coat as her voice quivered with disbelief. Ethan stepped closer, narrowing his eyes as he tried to make sense of the discovery. Meanwhile, the cat stood perfectly still, its gaze fixed on something distant, as if it sensed an even greater horror lurking ahead. The stillness shattered abruptly as a louder, nearer sound echoed through the warehouse. Ethan's flashlight quickly swung toward a partially open metal door at the far end, revealing a deeper, pitch-black space beyond. He and Megan exchanged uneasy glances, their apprehension mounting as they realized they were only scratching the surface of a much darker mystery. As they advanced cautiously, their flashlights illuminated a sight that froze them in place. A lifeless body sprawled on the floor. It looked as though it had been left there for days, maybe even weeks, and the grim scene carried an inexplicable weight. Something about it didn't add up. The man wasn't dressed like someone who lived on the streets, nor did he appear to be an unsuspecting victim. His clothes were clean and intact, and clutched in one hand was a chain with a gold pendant. Ethan leaned closer, carefully removing the chain to examine it under the flashlight's beam. It was a small, unadorned cross, yet its simplicity carried a profound significance. The pendant seemed deeply personal, a clue to who this man might have been. Who was he? And what was he doing here? Ethan murmured, more to himself than to Megan. Still trying to process the unsettling scene, Megan noticed the cat had now settled beside the body. Its intense, unblinking gaze seemed to survey the area like a silent guardian of this grim tableau, adding an eerie layer to the already disturbing atmosphere. Breaking the silence, Megan's voice wavered as she spoke. "This isn't normal. This place, there's something wrong about it." She fell silent, mid-sentence, her words cut short by a new sound. Footsteps. They were fast, heavy, and unmistakably approaching from outside the warehouse. "We need to leave immediately," Ethan urged, his tone sharp as he pulled Megan's arm. Both quickly switched off their flashlights, their movements cautious as they crept toward the exit, each step carefully measured to avoid making a sound. The tension in the air was suffocating, every noise amplified in the silence of the warehouse. Yet the cat stayed put, unmoving beside the lifeless body, as though it had a purpose yet to fulfill. Before stepping through the door, Ethan glanced back at the feline, its silhouette stark against the warehouse's murky shadows. The creature's behavior radiated an eerie confidence, as if it understood something they didn't. The approaching footsteps grew louder, reverberating through the cavernous space. Ethan and Megan ducked behind a nearby stack of boxes, holding their breath as they tried to catch a glimpse of who or what was coming. The echoing sound grew sharper until a figure finally emerged at the entrance. It was a tall man clad in dark clothing, clutching something indiscernible in his hands. The dim lighting obscured the object, but his presence alone was enough to send a shiver down Megan's spine. Her heart pounded wildly as she reflexively gripped Ethan's arm tighter. "We have to go now," she whispered, her voice trembling with urgency. Ethan gave a silent nod, and they resumed their careful retreat, inching toward the side door. Just as they were about to make their escape, a sudden piercing sound froze them in place. The cat let out a loud, echoing meow. The noise shattered the fragile quiet like an alarm, drawing the man's attention instantly. His gaze swept across the warehouse until it locked onto the cat, still poised beside the body. For a moment he seemed disoriented, his expression a mix of confusion and suspicion. Then, without warning, he reached into his coat and retrieved something unidentifiable in the dim light. Ethan and Megan knew their window, for escape had closed. Without hesitation, they bolted through the door, their footsteps blending with the rapid thuds of the man chasing after them. The sound of pursuit drew closer with each passing second, but they didn't dare stop. Meanwhile, the cat stayed behind, steadfast beside the body, its glowing eyes fixed on the darkness ahead. It seemed as though the creature was biding its time, waiting for the next chapter of an unfolding, sinister tale. The chase erupted into chaos. The freezing night air was sharp against Ethan and Megan's skin as they sprinted across the warehouse courtyard, the cold wind biting at their faces. Shadows from the surrounding trees flickered under the dim light, partially concealing their forms, but the pounding footsteps of their pursuer grew louder with every moment. Megan's heart hammered in her chest, each beat threatening to drown out the sound of her labored breathing. Every step felt like a struggle to keep up their frantic pace, the once quiet mystery of the warehouse now transformed into a fight for survival. The sense of danger only deepened with each passing second. Though she could see the fear etched on Ethan's face, neither of them dared to hesitate. "Keep going, don't stop!" Ethan barked, grabbing her arm to urge her forward. Together, they darted along the edge of the warehouse, keeping to the shadows to avoid the sparse glow of the broken streetlights scattered around the abandoned lot. The warehouse, one of several decrepit industrial buildings in the area, seemed lost in time, a relic of forgotten days. The stillness of the lot was shattered only by their frantic movements and the steady, menacing steps of the man chasing them. They had no time to think, no space for mistakes. Whatever the man had seen back inside the warehouse, it was clear he couldn't let anyone else uncover it. And Ethan and Megan had stumbled into something far more dangerous than they had ever anticipated. Ethan yanked Megan toward a stack of rusty, abandoned crates, pushing her down behind the corroded metal. Pressing a finger to his lips, he motioned for silence. She nodded, struggling to quiet her ragged breaths. The courtyard fell eerily still as the man stepped into view, his pace slowing, each footfall deliberate and methodical. His movements suggested an acute awareness, his sharp eyes scanning every darkened corner for any sign of movement. He carried a gun, its barrel catching the faint light as he gripped it tightly, ready to react at the slightest disturbance. Megan felt sweat bead on her temples despite the biting cold, the tension building until it felt unbearable. Her hands trembled uncontrollably as fear seeped into every fiber of her being, threatening to render her immobile. She turned her eyes to Ethan, who remained still and focused, his mind clearly racing to find their next move. He studied their surroundings, searching for the smallest chance to slip away unnoticed. The stakes had never felt higher, and their pursuers' careful steps only amplified the suffocating silence. For Megan and Ethan, time was running out. Then, without warning, a sound from the warehouse broke the stillness of the courtyard, instantly grabbing the man's attention. Megan clutched Ethan's arm, her voice barely audible as she whispered in astonishment, "The cat!" The animal's sharp, prolonged meow pierced through the silence, echoing off the walls like a siren, and momentarily drawing the man's focus away. He paused, his attention shifting toward the warehouse entrance, his eyes darting between the dark interior and the surrounding area. Hidden from view, Ethan and Megan froze, holding their breath. Relief washed over them, but it was fleeting. They knew this dangerous game was far from finished. "If he keeps searching outside, we might get a chance," Ethan murmured, his gaze fixed on the man. A moment later, the pursuer made his decision, stepping into the shadowy warehouse, casting one last glance behind him before vanishing into the darkness. As the man disappeared, Megan leaned closer to Ethan, her voice trembling with urgency. "We need to get out of here and call for backup. Whoever this guy is, he's deeply involved in something serious." Ethan nodded, but remained focused on the warehouse entrance. "You're right," he replied, already rising to his feet. "But we can't leave without finding out what's really going on. We need solid evidence." Megan hesitated, torn between caution and the need to act. She understood Ethan's point. Leaving now without answers might mean missing a vital opportunity to uncover something significant. There had to be a reason the cat had drawn them here. Walking away felt wrong, as though they were abandoning a piece of the puzzle. Without wasting another moment, they began moving silently, searching for a less conspicuous way into the warehouse, all while remaining on high alert. Their hearts still pounded from the earlier chase, but a newfound determination pushed them forward. After several tense minutes of careful searching, they discovered a small window on the far side of the building. It was partially shattered and just wide enough for them to squeeze through. Ethan glanced at Megan, who met his gaze and gave a subtle nod of agreement. Slowly and deliberately, they climbed through the opening, landing in a cramped, damp room. The air was thick with an overpowering stench, and the darkness seemed to press down on them. Ethan quickly switched on his flashlight, its beam cutting through the oppressive gloom. "We have to move fast," he whispered, his voice steady but urgent. Despite the danger, their sense of purpose grew stronger. They couldn't turn back now, not when the answers they sought might be just within reach. "We don't know how much time we have before he comes back," Ethan whispered as they moved quickly but carefully around the room. It was an old storage space, filled with rusty shelves, weighed down by decaying tools and the remnants of forgotten equipment. A thick layer of dust blanketed everything, and the stale, oppressive smell in the air made breathing feel like a chore. "We need to find something, anything that can tell us who this man is and what he's doing here," Megan said, her tone steady but charged with urgency as she began rifling through the clutter with purpose. As her eyes scanned the room, they landed on a small iron cabinet leaning against a dimly lit corner. It seemed different from the rest of the neglected objects, as though it didn't quite belong. Something about it tugged at her instincts. "This could give us some answers," she murmured, picking up a sturdy iron bar from the floor and jamming it against the rusted lock. After several forceful attempts, accompanied by sharp metallic groans and clicks, the cabinet finally yielded with a resounding bang that echoed through the room. Inside was a stack of old, weathered folders, each one meticulously labeled with names and dates. Ethan pulled one out, flipping through its contents rapidly. His expression shifted as he grasped the significance of what he was reading. Meanwhile, Megan opened another folder and froze, her breath catching in her throat as the horrifying truth stared back at her. The files were detailed reports about missing children. Photographs, dates, and personal descriptions were meticulously documented, painting a chilling picture. "These are the children who've disappeared over the past few months," Megan said, her voice cracking as tears welled in her eyes. "No one ever figured out what happened to them." "This is sickening," she whispered, her words trembling with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Ethan stood beside her, holding another folder tightly, his jaw clenched as he tried to absorb the enormity of what they had uncovered. "This man," he said, his voice low but firm, "is part of something far more sinister than we ever imagined." The room felt stifling, as if the weight of their discovery had thickened the air around them. The clock was ticking, and they both understood that their next decision could change everything. The mystery they faced had evolved. It was no longer just about the man or the cat, but something far more sinister that demanded their attention. Once again, footsteps echoed through the vast, empty warehouse. The man was returning. "We need to leave now," Megan hissed urgently, snapping her folders shut while trying to maintain composure. But before they could make their move, an unexpected moment unfolded. The cat reappeared, emerging silently from a shadowed corner. Its eyes glimmered in the dim light as it gazed at them intently, letting out a quiet meow. This time, the sound lacked its earlier urgency, carrying instead a strange, calming reassurance, almost as if offering a final piece of unspoken guidance. Megan and Ethan shared a glance, wordlessly understanding the cat's silent gesture of gratitude. They knew it was time to go. With a renewed sense of purpose, they prepared to leave, inching toward the nearest exit. The man was still unaware of their presence, but every passing second was a gamble. Just before stepping out, Megan turned back one last time. The cat remained where it was, sitting perfectly still and radiating an uncanny sense of calm. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling, before following Ethan out. As they reached the door and eased it open, a loud metallic scraping sound shattered the silence, echoing through the warehouse like an alarm. The man instantly spun toward the noise, raising his weapon. "Run!" Ethan shouted, grabbing Megan's hand and pulling her into a desperate sprint. Gunshots rang out behind them as they raced through the shadows of the night, their hearts pounding wildly. Each shot was a sharp reminder of the danger at their backs, but adrenaline pushed them forward. Amid the chaos, one thought anchored them, a sense of purpose. The knowledge they carried was dangerous, a risk to them and possibly others, but it was also a burden they couldn't abandon. Finally, Ethan slowed, leaning forward to catch his breath. "All right," he said, his voice steady despite the tension. "Let's start from the beginning. Tell me everything." As Megan and Ethan began recounting their harrowing ordeal, the gravity of their revelation seemed to fill the room, making the atmosphere dense with tension. The stakes were undeniable, but they pressed on, their words steady despite the weight of their story. With each detail shared, they felt the walls metaphorically closing in, yet somewhere amidst the dread, a faint spark of hope glimmered. They had made a pact to confront the darkness looming over not just their lives, but the lives of countless others. In that moment, they realized the immense power of their voices, how their united efforts could shine as a beacon against the shadows threatening to engulf them. Their decision to expose the truth would place the newspaper in the heart of a storm and expose everyone involved to unparalleled danger. Yet the lingering question loomed: could they afford to turn away and do nothing? "This is serious," the editor said gravely, sliding the papers back onto the table. His expression was heavy, his tone reflective of the perilous implications. "If what you're saying is accurate, this story will dominate the headlines, but it could also endanger all of us." Ethan and Megan exchanged a glance, their unspoken determination clear. "We understand the risks," Ethan said firmly, his voice unwavering. "But this is something we have to do. It's the right thing." The editor leaned back, drawing a slow breath as he weighed the situation. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. "I'll support you," he said cautiously, "but we have to tread carefully. I'll reach out to a few trusted people and start investigating this under the radar. If this really involves a network, acting rashly could result in them erasing every trace of evidence before we can expose them." As the editor began outlining the steps for a discreet investigation, Megan's gaze wandered to the window. On the dimly lit sidewalk outside, the cat stood once more, its eyes gleaming in the moonlight, fixed on the building as though silently observing everything. For a brief moment, Megan allowed herself a small smile. Somehow, amidst the chaos and uncertainty, she felt a glimmer of relief and a cautious sense of hope. "We're on the right track," Megan murmured, her voice steady yet tinged with anticipation. Ethan, standing beside her, gave a small nod of agreement. "I feel the same way," he responded quietly. But deep down, they both understood the gravity of what lay ahead. The next few hours would be pivotal, and the danger they faced was closer than either of them could fully grasp. The cat's enigmatic involvement, though still a mystery, felt more significant with each passing moment. As they stepped out of the newspaper office, the night seemed unnervingly still, its silence heavy with tension. Every footstep echoed their heightened vigilance. They were acutely aware that their decision to involve the editor had escalated the risk. Their lives were now entangled in a perilous web. There was no retreat. Time was running out, and the network they were after felt like a tightening noose, inching closer to both exposure and retaliation. The cat remained on the sidewalk, its glowing eyes fixed intently on Megan and Ethan. Without a word, Ethan crouched down, his hand gently stroking the feline's head. For the first time that night, he felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the mysterious animal. Its presence seemed too purposeful to be mere chance, as if something far greater, beyond human comprehension, was guiding them forward, urging them not to falter. "We need to go back to the warehouse," Megan said abruptly, her voice firm with resolve. "There's more waiting for us there. I can feel it. What we found earlier was just the beginning." Ethan hesitated, the weight of her words sinking in. The thought of returning to such a dangerous place churned in his mind, but he also knew she was right. Whatever answers they sought were still hidden in that desolate building, waiting to be uncovered. "Okay," he agreed cautiously, his tone measured. "But this time, we have to be even more careful. We can't afford another close call." Their decision made, the two began their journey back to the warehouse. The air was heavy, thick with foreboding, and every step seemed to amplify the sense of peril surrounding them. The cat followed silently, its movements graceful and ghost-like, as though it were a guardian spectre protecting them from the shadows. Its constant presence was a quiet reminder that though danger loomed on all sides, they were not entirely alone. When they reached the warehouse at last, the entire area was shrouded in pitch-black darkness. An oppressive silence blanketed the scene, and there was no sign of the man who had pursued them earlier. Yet, the absence of noise or movement didn't provide comfort. It suggested he might be lurking nearby, hidden and waiting. Moving with utmost caution, they approached the corroded doors. The soft groan of metal as it moved echoed unnaturally loudly in the void. With deliberate precision, Ethan pushed the doors ajar, making just enough space for them to slip inside. Each step they took into the warehouse felt like a deliberate gamble, a decision that might alter everything. An eerie sensation of being observed clung to them, an invisible presence that shadowed their every move. Even their silent companion, the cat, seemed unable to foresee what lay ahead. Inside, the warehouse seemed transformed. The air was unnervingly cold, with a sharpness that felt unnatural. Shadows flickered and twisted along the bare concrete walls, as though the building itself was alive with secrets it refused to surrender. Megan cast a glance at Ethan, who gripped the flashlight tightly, its beam carving a path through the dense darkness. "We need to uncover more evidence," she murmured, her voice low as her eyes adjusted to the dim surroundings. A heavy tension hung in the air, making each step feel like a weighted struggle. Suddenly the silence fractured. At first it was faint, barely noticeable, a sound on the edge of perception. But it soon became undeniable, voices, distant and subdued, yet unmistakable. Someone else was there. They froze in place, instincts sharpening as they scanned their surroundings. "Did you hear that?" Ethan asked, his voice barely audible, as he lowered the flashlight slightly, the beam wavering. "I did," Megan replied, her throat tightening. "We're not alone." Nearby, the cat stopped too. Its ears flicked toward the sound, straining to catch details beyond human senses. Then, without warning, it bolted toward a side door, its movements resolute and deliberate. Megan's eyes widened in surprise, her breath hitching as she watched the feline race ahead with a purpose only it seemed to understand. "The cat went in there," Megan whispered, her voice tinged with surprise. "I think we should follow him." "It looks like he knows more than we do," Ethan replied, attempting a nervous joke to ease the tension. Without wasting another moment, they moved quietly, trailing the cat to the side door. They pushed it open cautiously and found themselves in a small, dimly illuminated room. Faint light filtered in through a broken window, casting a pale glow that faintly revealed what lay inside. The moment they stepped inside, they froze, stunned by the sight before them. 3 men stood gathered around a table, cluttered with papers, photographs, and documents. It looked like the remnants of a covert investigation. Megan's gaze locked onto one particular image amidst the chaos, a photo that sent a cold chill down her spine. It was Sophie, the missing girl. Her heart raced as the full weight of their discovery set in. These men weren't here by coincidence. Ethan exchanged a sharp, meaningful glance with her. No words were needed. They both understood they had stumbled into something far more significant and dangerous than they'd anticipated. Meanwhile, the cat sat near the door, its gleaming eyes fixed on them, as if to say, "This is only the beginning." Megan couldn't tear her eyes away from the photo of Sophie. The same image she studied in the archives was now here, part of this ominous scene. "My God," Ethan muttered under his breath, his pulse quickening. The low murmur of the men's voices filled the room, their tone suggesting an intense discussion. Though their words were unclear, the topic was unmistakable: the disappearances. The atmosphere in the room was suffocating, the tension palpable. Then their eyes settled on one of the men, and recognition struck like lightning. It was the same man who had attacked them earlier. Now he seemed restless, his movements agitated, his expression a mixture of nerves and frustration. This wasn't just a random encounter. It was a deliberate piece of a much larger, darker puzzle. "Some of our documents are missing," one of the men growled, his frustration evident as he slammed his hand against the table, scattering the papers. "We need to find those intruders before they cause us trouble." Ethan and Megan exchanged a panicked glance. They knew they needed to leave immediately, but before they could make a move, something entirely unexpected unfolded. The cat, their silent guide up until now, stepped boldly into the center of the room. Its movements were so quiet they were almost imperceptible, yet its presence commanded instant attention. "What is that?" one of the men asked, narrowing his eyes at the feline. The cat returned their stares with its unflinching, glowing gaze, as if daring them to react. Its calm but defiant stance seemed almost deliberate, as though it understood the gravity of the moment. "Let's go," Ethan whispered urgently, grabbing Megan's hand and leading her out of the room. Moving swiftly but silently, they slipped away, hearts pounding as they navigated the warehouse's dark corridors. Behind them, the men's voices rose in confusion, their shouts echoing through the vast space. Every step toward the exit felt like a race against time. "We need to call the police," Megan gasped, as they finally emerged into the open air. Her face was pale, her breath short. "Absolutely," Ethan agreed, his voice strained but determined. "But we have to move fast. Those men will stop at nothing to cover their tracks." The enormity of what they had uncovered spurred them onward. Each stride was fueled by adrenaline and an unrelenting drive to expose the truth. Yet the danger wasn't over. Ethan's gaze darted around nervously as he pulled out his phone and dialed the police. "If they realize we've exposed them," he said grimly, "they'll destroy everything, every shred of evidence." Even in their rush, Megan couldn't help but notice a familiar figure out of the corner of her eye. The cat was there, its bright eyes gleaming in the dark, keeping pace with them as if ensuring they made it to safety. For the first time that night, Megan felt a flicker of gratitude and relief. "This cat is incredible," she murmured, a faint smile breaking through her tension. For the first time, the heaviness of the night felt a little lighter. After what felt like an eternity, the police arrived in force. Following Ethan and Megan's detailed account, a carefully executed raid unfolded. The men responsible for the disappearances were apprehended, and all the evidence in the warehouse was seized. As the dust settled, a sense of hope began to replace the despair that had loomed over so many families. The case which had haunted the town, was finally unraveling. For Megan and Ethan, it was a moment of bittersweet triumph. They had come closer to the danger than they'd ever imagined, but their efforts had made a real difference. As they stood amidst the aftermath, Megan glanced down at the cat sitting calmly beside them. Its eyes gleamed with a quiet satisfaction, as though it understood the role it had played. For a moment, the chaos of the night faded, replaced by a shared sense of accomplishment. "You're amazing," she said softly, the weight of her words carrying more than gratitude. It was admiration for a guide who had been as fearless as they were. Yet one mystery continued to captivate their minds: the enigmatic cat. How did it know exactly where to lead them? How had it managed to uncover the truth when no one else seemed aware of the hidden danger? As Megan gently stroked the cat one last time before leaving, a deep sense of gratitude mingled with her curiosity. "Thank you, my friend," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. The cat held her gaze briefly before turning and padding quietly down the street. Its silhouette faded into the darkness as effortlessly as it had appeared. The story of the uncovered disappearance ring quickly made headlines. Local newspapers and TV stations highlighted the bravery of Megan and Ethan, applauding their determination to expose the truth despite the risks. Families of the victims finally had closure, and justice was set in motion. Yet for Megan, the true hero of that night wasn't human. It was the mysterious cat. Without its guidance, they might never have found the answers they sought. As the city celebrated the unraveling of one of its darkest secrets, Megan knew she would always remember the cat that in its inexplicable way led them from darkness to light. She never discovered where it came from or where it disappeared to, but its presence lingered in her memory as a beacon of courage and intuition. A few weeks later, Megan and Ethan visited a local shelter with the intention of adopting a cat. Among the many waiting for a home, one particular feline caught Megan's attention. Its eyes gleamed with an intensity eerily similar to the mysterious cat that had guided them. "I think we've found our friend," Megan said with a smile, gently stroking the new member of their family. Life moved forward, but the memory of the extraordinary cat never faded. It remained etched in their hearts as the silent hero who, with unerring instincts, had led two determined officers straight to the truth. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more thrilling tales like this one. Click the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell to stay updated. And if this journey of mystery and emotion resonated with you, leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next video, filled with new adventures and heartfelt moments. Until then.